Much for having us back out again. This race, fifth I'm hearing, since we launched this race in November. I forgot about that fifth one. We snuck it in. Some of you were there, some were not. In fact, the last time we visited here, we were traveling the state to listen to and to meet with veterans all over the state of Texas to make sure that we do better by those who've done so well for all of us, the women and men who put their lives on the line. America. Ticker tape. Thank you for your at best. Right, hatred from their countries who sent them. Nonetheless, work put their heads. This is work their life. Veterans of care of serve at the same and makes is their first come back still half a world away. Somalia is that because we don't have who serve who come being exposed and knows what harder time families when they're to stand up and say, you know what, it took this country 40 years to take my exposure to Agent Orange seriously and treat it as a presumptive condition for the cancers and the conditions that so many of my colleagues have died from. I'm not going to wait 40 years for you to get that same kind of help and service. They're the inspiration for our idea to have Texas set up a toxic burn pit registry so that everyone exposed gets connected to the care that they need. Maybe the federal government gets its act together, does the right thing, but we're not going to wait for them to do that. We're going to do the right thing as Texans right now. We also talked about the fact that most of us, I hope all of us in this room, tonight in your homes, in your apartments, in my hotel room here in Wichita Falls, will have a roof over our head, a bed that we can count on, a place where we can lay our head down. But in this great state, with a $2 trillion gross domestic product, the 9th largest economy on planet Earth, there will be hundreds of veterans this evening who will be sleeping under bridges, on the side of roads, in public parks. It's unconscionable, it's unforgivable, and for all of us, it is unacceptable. When we win this race, we will spare no expense. We will lift any burden to make sure every veteran has that home, has that roof over their head, that housing comes first before anything else, and that we connect them with the treatment and the care that they deserve. We talked about something that's hard to talk about when we were last here in Wichita Falls, which is suicide. But if we don't talk about it, we don't confront it, we don't face it, likely we're not going to do anything about it. I don't know what the official number is anymore. When I served in Congress on the House Veterans Affairs Committee, it was 22 veterans a day, every day in this country, took their lives. Veterans with different conditions, with different status of discharge, like other than honorable, had a much higher rate. I want to make sure that Texas is a leader in reducing the prevalence of veteran suicide and suicidal ideation. That means partnering with the VA wherever we can to improve access to mental health care, access to any kind of primary health care that's currently missing for that veteran. But it also means where the VA and the federal government have gaps, that we as Texans step up and do a better job of connecting veterans with private providers, with community providers, and in the rural counties that I've just been in before coming to yours here in Wichita Falls, visiting places like Dumas and Spearman, and just now in Quanah, and before that, Pampa last night, making sure that if you live in a part of rural Texas, which, by the way, as you all know, disproportionately provides the women and men who elect to serve this country in uniform, that you're not too far away from care in order to be able to get it. So standing up more of these clinics, including mental health care clinics that we're missing in the state. I think you all know this, it bears repeating. We are 51st in America in access to mental health care. Our largest provider of mental health care services in this state is the county jail system. There are men and women who approach me and tell me about their siblings or their parents or their kids who will get arrested on purpose to be taken to the county jail where perhaps with their schizophrenia, their bipolar disorder, their clinical depression, they're guaranteed some care for some limited amount of time, maybe even some psychotropic medication because they can't otherwise afford it. In addition to making sure we connect more veterans with more care, we're also going to make sure we help everyone else out by expanding Medicaid in this state and bringing $10 billion a year in. Making sure that no one is too poor or too remote or disconnected from power and wealth to be able to be well enough, healthy enough to live to their full potential. And I think this issue also came up at our meeting. Those veterans who have been to the VA, who find in the past, maybe it's not currently the condition, that the VA is all too willing to prescribe an opioid, to which a veteran may become addicted, from which a veteran might die. And yet when that same veteran goes in and says, I don't want that, if I could receive cannabis, if marijuana were legal, that's the one thing that treats my conditions, that restores my appetite, helps me to sleep, makes me feel okay. And right now in this state, if that veteran were to use marijuana, she is a criminal in the eyes of the law. We spend, ladies and gentlemen, $500 million a year locking up people for possession of a substance that is legal in just about every other state in the union. We forego another $500 million by taxing the controlled sale of marijuana in the state of Texas. It's still being sold. You can probably get your hands on it pretty easily if you want to, but we don't regulate it. We don't keep it out of our middle schools or our high schools. And Amy and I are the parents of 2 high schoolers and a middle schooler, and we are very concerned about that because kids using marijuana, not good for your brain, not good for your development. I want to keep it away from them. But in a black market, they don't ID. They don't care. As long as you have the money, they're willing to sell it to you. So we can do much better by and for one another by doing the responsible right thing. And that means legalizing marijuana in the state of Texas and expunging the arrest records for those who've done time. Makes too much sense. Another kind of selfless public servant that I want to recognize right now is the school teacher and the librarian and the counselor and the support staff, the people who make public education possible. You all are my heroes. This is among the toughest times that we've lived through, period, and among the toughest times to be an educator. Listening to you, you told me what it's like to be in that classroom with kids who have come through 2 years of a pandemic in a state where nearly 100,000 lives have been lost. A lot of them have lost a grandparent. A lot of them, their folks, have lost their job. Many of these families have lost their homes, but it does not deter you in trying to connect with them, to unlock a lifelong love of learning, to stoke their curiosity so they can pursue their heart's desire, live up to their full potential, reveal their genius for their own benefit, but also to the benefit of each and every single one of us. And as some of you have told me, listen, reading, writing, arithmetic, of course, Beto, we're focused on that. We just met the assistant band director in Quanah, and I talked to him about my youngest being in band and how that's unlocking new worlds for him. And I love him, and I love the arts and music education. But these teachers right now, yeah, let's hear it for arts and music education. We don't get enough applause for that. Yeah. But so many of you are also telling me, after this pandemic, with so many thousands of teachers leaving the profession, so many of you taking on larger class sizes as a result, selflessly doing this, when you're underpaid in Wichita County, this is the official number. You tell me if I'm reading this wrong. Underpaid $16,000 against just the national average. Not the best paid teacher in America. That's something else altogether. Just to get to par, just to get to average, you're $16,000 down. Now, can we blame that young teacher who is struggling in a state that's losing teachers by the thousands, who's told by her governor that she's got to turn in the parents of the transgender kid for child abuse, who is not allowed to teach the full, true history or story of this state, who is attacked and demeaned and disrespected and forced to perform to a high-stakes, high-pressure, standardized test that does nothing to measure the real potential in that kid's brain or the effort expended by that educator? Do we blame her for perhaps going to another community in another state, especially if she cares anything about making her own decisions about her own body and her own future and can't do that right now in the state of Texas? So, from listening to you, Republicans, Democrats, independents, but all of you educators, this is my proposal. We start by ensuring that you're paid enough not to have to work a second or a third job. So in Wichita County, that means an increase of $15,000 to get you up to par with the rest of the country. It means that if you're a retired teacher and you have not seen a cost of living adjustment since the year of our Lord 2004, there will be one every single year going forward that matches inflation in the state of Texas. It means that we listen to you and we cancel the STAR test and replace it with something better. We show you respect. We treat you with dignity. You've answered a calling. You didn't do this for the money, the fame, or the glory. In fact, you took on student loan debt for the privilege of teaching our kids. You took on a second job over the summer or on the weekends or nights that you can make ends meet in your own home. Again, you're our heroes, and we're losing you at a frightening rate. The official number is we lose 50% of our school teachers in Texas within their first 5 years. The real number is something higher. My youngest, Henry, 11 years old, just completed the 5th grade, did not have a permanent classroom teacher the entire year, right? God bless the subs for stepping in, but he and his classmates would have benefited from having the same consistent presence in front of them, right? Well, when I tell the parent to the next to me who has a kid in another classroom, same story from her. When I tell that story in Austin, same story there. When I repeat it in Amarillo, same story there. We're seeing it in almost every community right now. So here's another idea I want to try on for you. For the young people in the room who are thinking about being an educator, a counselor, a librarian in one of our schools, I'll make this commitment to you. Not only will I have your backs, not only will I fight for you, but if you want to pursue this in-demand profession that is underserved in communities just like this one and many other across the state, I'll do everything I can to remove student loan debt as an obstacle to do that so that you can focus on your education, getting ahead, and delivering for kids. Another idea that I've listened to you all about, and I mean, this is kind of crazy, but what if in the energy capital of the world, we could keep the power on when the temperature dropped? Is it asking too much when you flick the switch that the lights come on, or that the heat runs, or that the water flows because your pipes are not frozen, and then they don't burst and damage your home to the tune of tens of billions of dollars that we collectively paid across the state of Texas? Wouldn't it be nice if for those who stole money from us when we were freezing in our homes for 5 days last February, those pipeline companies, those energy traders stole $11 billion from the people of Texas? The governor, Greg Abbott, said to his buddies and his biggest donors, we're going to peg the price of fuel 200 times its going rate in the midst of a disaster. Some utilities went into bankruptcy trying to pay that. Others took on billions of dollars in debt. Those pipeline companies didn't have to honor the contracts that they made with those who provide your electricity. Not only is it immoral, it also happens to be illegal. State statute says that in the midst of a declared emergency or crisis in the state of Texas, you cannot price gouge the people of the state, and specifically mentioned in that statute is fuel. Now, when the person whose company made $2.4 billion over those 5 days where people were dying of hypothermia and carbon monoxide poisoning and burning up in their homes as they were burning their furniture to try to stay warm, when that guy slides a $1 million campaign contribution check over to Greg Abbott, as Kelsey Warren did after his company made $2.4 billion, you now know why Greg Abbott hasn't tried to claw back those illegally gained $11 billion. Well, I will have no such problems. I will pursue that $11 billion with all I've got, try to return it to you to lower your electricity bills. We're going to weatherize and winterize the grid. We're going to connect ERCOT with the national grid so that we can drop down power when we need it. We're going to do the common sense things that aren't good for Democrats or not good for Republicans. They're just good for all of us. They make too much common sense not to be able to do them. And you ask, well, why hasn't the governor paid teachers more or included a cost of living adjustment for retired teachers or done these things to support our veterans that I just talked about or fix the grid or reduced your utility bills or done something about skyrocketing property taxes that have gone up $20 billion, 40% in the 7 years that he's been in office? Now, do I think he's a bad guy? No. Do I think he's evil? Absolutely not. Does he wake up wanting the grid to fail? Does he wake up wanting kids to be shot in their school? No. Does he wake up wanting Child Protective Services to be the worst run foster care program in the United States of America, bar none? I don't think he wants these things. But I tell you what, and I've noticed this as I've traveled the Panhandle, West Texas, smaller communities like Pecos and Spearman and others, he's taking you for granted. He feels like he's got you in the bag. He doesn't show up here. He doesn't take questions from you at town halls like these, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But he does it because he thinks that he has already won this election. He doesn't feel accountable to you. There's no consequence for his failure to perform. And for whatever reason, he's unwilling or he's incapable of doing the right thing on any of these issues. So it's up to us to change the channel and change the person in that office and make sure that we have someone who's going to fight for us, look out for us, and produce these changes that we need. Are you all with me on this? Y'all want to do this? We got to do this. We got to do this. I mean, the things that we're talking about, when you leave here and you're talking with that friend of yours who's never voted for a Democrat in their lives, that Republican mom that you have, and I grew up in a Republican mom's household, and I've convinced my mom, by the way, to vote for me in this election. So if I could do it, you can do it too. In fact, it's my formerly Republican mom's birthday today, so I want to wish her a happy birthday, Mom, wherever you are out there. But when they ask you, they say, hey, I know you went out to see Beto. What is this guy all about? We'll say, he talked about fixing the grid. He gave a very specific proposal for how he's going to support our veterans, our active duty service members at Shepherd who return from service and choose to live in this community, choose to be here in Texas. He talked about making sure that we have world-class public schools by having the backs of our public school educators. He talked about reducing inflation by bringing our property taxes down, reducing our utility bills, fixing the grid. I mean, these are common sense things. There will be some issues that we'll disagree on, right? And even between Democrats or between Republicans, or I've been married 17 years, between husband and wife, you'll have some disagreements. No two people will agree on everything all the time. But on these issues, we're going to have a hard time finding someone to take the other side of the argument, right? That's what we're running on right now. Let the other side own who you're supposed to hate, who you're supposed to be afraid of, how we're supposed to divide along lines of our differences. We're going to talk about coming together and doing the big things that Texas is truly capable of doing. But we've been too distracted over these culture wars, over this politics of hatred and fear, to get those things done. That's how we ended up with a broken grid in the energy capital of the world. That's why these heroic public school teachers aren't getting the resources or the support or the help that they need. It's because we haven't been focused on them so far. It's time to return to that. And listen, let me put it this way. Because one of the other issues that's come up in some of our previous conversations, including when I was with you last June, I wasn't a candidate at the time. I was working on voting rights issues and helping to get people registered to vote in this community. We talked about the attack on our democracy and the fact that it is harder to vote or to register to vote in the state of Texas than it is in any other state in the union. You all saw this in March. 13% of the mail-in ballots cast in this state were rejected. Not 13% of the people couldn't find their way to the polls or couldn't figure out how to do this or requested it and didn't vote. No, these are folks who voted, wanted to make sure that their voices were heard, that their votes were counted, and they were rejected. And to put a point to this, a 95-year-old World War II veteran, a guy who fought fascism overseas to defend democracy right here at home, had his request to vote by mail denied not once, but 3 separate times. And I cannot think of someone more deserving of the ability to vote. That guy was willing to lose his life for our right to vote, and he cannot vote in the state of Texas. And so we'll ask ourselves, well, shoot, given everything that we are up against, given this attack on our democracy, I mean, if we watched the news tonight and they told us that there were elections held in Venezuela and 13% of the ballots were rejected, we'd say that checks out. Sounds like what you'd expect from Venezuela. When it happens in Texas, that should wake us up and grab our attention and shock our conscience. And I know that it does, but it can also, for some, and I don't blame you if you feel this way, I think it's only human, it can invite the temptation to despair. And that's a dangerous thing, because when you start to despair, you start to give up and you say, you know what? I guess that's just what it means to live in Texas. You can't count on your kid not being shot in their classroom. You can't make your own choices about your body. If you want to teach, you have to go into poverty. You can't count on the lights coming on. And you can't guarantee that your vote is going to count in this election. I guess that's just Texas. That's a trade-off for living here. What we need to remember is that we've been up against these kind of challenges, even bigger ones, and we prevailed before. When it comes to voting, my fellow El Pasoan, our fellow Texan, an African-American doctor named Lawrence Nixon went up against the white primary. That was a law of the land after the 1923 Texas legislative session. To be clear, because we're familiar with the civil rights and voting rights struggle of the 50s and the 60s, the how many jelly beans are in the jar, can you recite the state constitution, here's a literacy test, here's a poll tax. It was none of that. Literally in statute, a majority of our legislators said, if you're black, you're not voting. So Dr. Lawrence Nixon, who founded the first chapter of the NAACP in the state of Texas in 1914 in El Paso, voted in every election, never missed a single one, worked with his city council and mayor on bond issues. He was as democratically and civically engaged as a person could be at the time, pays his poll tax in the election of 1924, which was a requirement at the time, takes the receipt into fire station number 5 on Texas Avenue in El Paso, Texas, and goes up to the election judges who knew him by name because he never missed an election. And they said, Dr. Nixon, you know we can't let you vote. And he said, I know you can't, but I've got to try. Try he did. He took his case to the local federal bench. He lost the decision. He appealed it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court, where he won not one, but 2 signal victories and ultimately integrated voting in the state of Texas. We're up against some challenges right now. But nothing like what Dr. Lawrence Nixon faced in 1923 and 1924. For those who are concerned, and I hope it is every single one of us, about the attack on women's rights in the state of Texas, and let me just make this clear, on the attack on women's lives in the state of Texas, we lead much of the developed world in the rate of maternal mortality in this state, because as over the last 10 years, they made it harder to get an abortion as they closed down more reproductive health care clinics. Not only could you make your own decisions about your own body, but try getting a cervical cancer screening, try seeing a family planning provider, try seeing a doctor of any kind in the least insured state in America. And for black women, it has been 3 times as deadly in this state. And now they outlaw abortion with no exception for rape, with no exception for incest. They're talking about checking your travel documents should you choose to cross the border and you're of childbearing age. They're going to punish employers who want to fund their female employees' ability to travel to make their own personal, private healthcare decisions. We can be tempted to despair. But here's what I've learned. We've been up against greater odds and achieved even greater things before. Prior to 1973, abortion was also illegal in the state of Texas. But no one from outside rode to our rescue to save the day. Jane Roe, as you all know, was a Texan of Roe versus Wade. But so importantly were Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington of Abilene, Texas, who successfully argued her case before an all-male Supreme Court and won that landmark decision 49 years ago. Texas women won the day back then, and I guarantee you, Texas women are going to win today to make sure every woman makes her own decisions about her own body, her own health care, and her own future. The other way I like to think about this, and I think about this as I think about my kids. Ulysses, who's 15, Molly, 14, Henry, who's 11. You know, the thing I fear most, and you all may have a different fear in your life, but for me, it's my kids. My kids are my conscience. My kids at some point will ask me, they'll ask my wife, Amy, their mom, when all this stuff was happening that I just described to you, when all this stuff was going on in the state of Texas, and you all lived in this democracy, and you had the power to change it, what did you do? So think about it like this. Very few generations have the privilege that ours has to fight for the things that we care most about, including our very democracy, when they are at stake. I don't think it's hyperbole to say that depending on what we do or don't do in 2022, we may not have free and fair elections in 2024 in this country. The attack on democracy did not end on the night of January 6, 2021, when the coup plotters were repelled. It has been rolling through our state legislatures, compromising the right to vote, threatening to overturn elections that are lawfully and legally and small d democratically decided. You know, we think about those men who landed on those beaches in June of 1944. We think about those women and the men who marched with them on Bloody Sunday in 1965, all willing, and some did, give their lives for this democracy because it was literally on the line. And but for them, we would not be here in this room having this conversation with this choice before us on the night of November 8th. So think about it like this. We are the heirs to their service, to their sacrifice, and to their struggle. And what we do with this inheritance that we've won by the luck of being born or having come to this country will define us in the eyes of our kids forever and determine our future. Those of us in this room, those of us in this state, and given Texas's role in this country, I would say those of us who live in this country. So, if you care about the future of Texas, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't, if you want to do something about it in addition to voting and getting folks registered to vote, there are a number of people in yellow vests in the room today. To a person, they have clipboards on them where they would love to add your names. When you add your name to that clipboard, I want to make sure that I'm being clear-eyed with you about what the expectation is. It is that you reach out, as Brenda has done for as long as I've known Brenda, to those voters who can decide the outcome of this election. I want you to talk to folks who maybe never miss an election. We just want to make sure that this one is on their radar as well. We want you to talk to folks who vote every presidential but miss every midterm, and this is a midterm. I want you to talk to the folks, there were 500,000 of them in 2018, who split their ticket, Republican and Democrat, in the state of Texas. 500,000 people voted for me for U.S. Senator, and those very same 500,000 people voted for Greg Abbott for governor. There are persuadable, swing, independent voters in the state of Texas. And you, in your own words, from your own heart, with your own message for why you showed up here tonight, you need to tell them why you are with us in this election. We only lost the last one by 216,000 votes. Remember, 500,000 people voted for both of us there. Imagine if we picked up 216, 250, 300,000 of those swing voters, all of who came over into our column. The only way we're going to do that is if you're willing to get on their doors or pick up the phone and get on their phones. It's one thing if they see an ad, if they even see the ad. I don't know how many of you still watch television or mute it when a political ad comes on, or you're just immune to the stuff because you've seen it your entire life. You say, that's a politician talking, whatever. A neighbor of yours shows up and it's human to human, eyeball to eyeball, face to face. That is some powerful stuff. You'll never forget the engagement. In 2020, check this out. 7 million Texans who were eligible to vote in that presidential election did not cast a ballot. 7 million Texans. I think in Wichita County, it was 30,000 people in this county who were eligible to vote, did not vote, and maybe another 5,000 have been added to the rolls since 2020. It's 35,000 people that we have yet to hear from, whose votes have yet to be counted. They also happen to be the very people that Greg Abbott has targeted for voter suppression and voter intimidation. When they rigged those rules last year in that so-called elections bill, it was to keep people at home and from voting. Right. If we knock on their doors, if we invite them into this democracy, if we share with them what we think is on the line in this next election, there's a far better chance that they will vote. And what about this? Let me leave you with this thought. What if on election night, the very people who were supposed to be the ones who did not show up because they were written out of our democracy are the ones who help us win and provide the margin of victory? Only happens if you knock on their doors. You all with me? You ready to do this? I am ready to do it with you. I'm so grateful that you came out. Cynthia Cano on our team has another microphone. She's right back here. And it sounds like she may make an announcement as well, because I see you holding that sheet. She's got this microphone. What she's going to want to do is get as many voices into this conversation as possible. If you have a great idea, if you have a question, if you have a criticism, I want to make sure that I have a chance to listen to you, to hear you. Our goal is to better understand the community and be able to hit the ground running January of 2023. Cynthia.
Just wanted to make a few recognitions, a few folks. Luis Serna Martinez, who's the county chair here in Wichita County.
Thank you, Luis.
There we go. Okay. And then we have Janelle Pondersmith. She's the former chair of the Wichita-Dent County Party. Over here to your left, thank you, Janelle, good to see you. Thank you for being here. And last, we'd like to recognize candidate Walter Kopich for State Representative District 69.
Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Did we leave anybody out? No? Okay, we're gonna start our first question right here.
Hello, Beto. I have been following you since you were running for senator, so I don't have any questions for you. But I want everybody to remember when Biden was running for president and he tried to come to Texas. Do you remember what happened to him? They chased him out. Republicans chased him out in their trucks. Beto here has run the state up and down with Cynthia by his side. You deserve to win, and we all need to be behind him.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. Thank you.
All right, here we go, and then I'll head back over there. I see you.
Okay, I've chased you all over the state, but I haven't asked you a question. So you know I do knock doors. And I want everybody to think about how important this governor's race is. Not only can Beto veto things and give us some strength and power, but when we knock doors, one of the things we constantly ask people if they're not sure who they're voting for, Beto, is did your insurance claim get paid? Was your power off? And so I want to go back to this because to relax last night, I actually read the Texas Insurance Commissioner's report. Then I went and looked at their 10Qs to see what their political donations were. And I want to let the people of Wichita Falls know that 60% of your insurance claims did not get paid during Snowvid, during the freeze. Your rates went up 12.5%, which it had just gone up 12.5% in 2018 after Harvey, even though none of your cars flooded. And I want to remind you that this man will appoint our Texas insurance commissioners. And the one thing I want to ask you, Beto, is will you hold them accountable? That was the largest natural disaster in the state of Texas, and less than 50% of our claims got paid. And the Texas Insurance Commission even says that most people just gave up, which is the thing that Belinda and I hear more often than not. People will tell us, I fought with them, I still don't have any money, my house still isn't fixed. And so you've always been about transparency. And I don't know how close they were going to sit to your governor's office, but if you don't run down the hall and kick them in the ass to ask them why, that they're even letting these companies write insurance policies if they cannot take care of Texans, their profits did not suffer. They did not need those rates, but they needed to pay and take care of us. There's some of us that have paid insurance for 40 plus years. And so I want to speak about that, but I also want to speak about the fact that we've had so many natural disasters with climate. The rest of the slate of candidates are important. Jay Clayburgh is running for Texas Land Commissioner, and if you didn't get your insurance, if you didn't get your insurance claim paid, you probably made a FEMA claim. And most of the FEMA claims in Texas didn't get paid either because George P. decided to give it to, as a political favor, the money we got in from the federal government. So could you talk about how important the appointments that you make are and assure people you are ready to appoint qualified professionals, Beto?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Thanks for everything you're doing right now. You know, I talked about what happened during the freeze last February when the power went out. The governor told his appointees to set the price of gas fuel artificially high, 200 times higher than where it was, which did nothing to generate more capacity or provide more electricity, but it did wonders for the profits of his biggest donors, who then turned around and literally wrote him millions of dollars of campaign contribution checks. The same holds true with his appointees on other committees and commissions and boards across the state of Texas. Chris has the numbers, he may even cite them for us, but when you look at some of his biggest donors, they're also the people that he has appointed to all of these boards, committees, and commissions. There is so much conflict of interest there, it begs the question of corruption, and I don't know if it meets the legal definition, but the common sense one is satisfied in my mind. We need to make sure that people are appointed based on their subject matter expertise, on their experience, and on their ability to reflect this state, so that all of the state is reflected and represented in those who hold positions of public trust and power. And the last word, and it's one that you used earlier, is accountability. We just don't have that in this state right now. We don't have accountability for the freeze still. We're more than 8 weeks from that shooting in Uvalde. I talk to those families all the time. They still don't have accountability, truth, transparency, or justice. And believe me, they're not waiting on it. They are marching in the streets of Uvalde. They're holding people in power responsible for that. We need someone in power who feels that way. And that's why we're running this race together, Brenda. So thank you for the question. Really appreciate it. Ms. Connell.
Yes, sir. We've never met before. My name is Stanley Grider, and my dad and 5 of his brothers and my Uncle James on my mother's side were World War II veterans. There were 6 Grider boys. We hold the record. Griders hold the record for 6 boys in combat in World War II in the Army, Navy, and the U.S. Air Command, Air Corps. But I'm thank you. I learned a lot from those guys, and they told me that right-wing fascism was going to rear its ugly head once they all died. But I'm going to tell you one thing about me, too. I'm a former bull rider, baseball umpire, and football referee. There are pieces of me on rodeo arenas and baseball diamonds and football fields all over the state of Texas. Right now, I'm a youth league football coach, and I want to give you my pregame football pep talk.
Let's do it. Sir, I was wondering where that whistle came from, and now I know. Yeah.
I want to tell everybody, I want you to eat this up and digest it. Get a gleam in your eye, a fire in your belly, some ice water in your veins, and some iron in your spine, and we're working together. We will win this thing and defeat and demoralize Greg Abbott.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, we needed that. Thank you, sir. Wow. Thank you.
I don't know how I'm going to follow that. My name is Courtney Abubakar. I'm a middle school teacher and coach, so I might need to get...
There we go. Another coach.
I might need some lessons because that was inspiring. I want to go run a race now. I won't, but I want to. I thank you for fighting for us. I am a middle school teacher. I actually met your cousin at a PD in DC this month, Bonnie Marlowe. She says hi. Like a lot of teachers or just anybody who has children or who has a heart, I'm concerned about gun violence in schools. And I wondered if you would address your thoughts or your plans or how you would tackle that issue.
Great. Courtney, thanks for being here. Thanks for what you do. I mentioned earlier, hard time to be in the profession. You've chosen to do that. Thank you. First thing we need to do is to listen to you and other educators, support staff in these schools, principals, parents, kids. I think they're going to have some of the best answers for us. And in some cases, we've learned some things from Uvalde and other school shootings about what we could do better literally on our campuses. And there's been some talk about doors, and doors aren't going to solve everything, but let's learn from some mistakes that were made there, right? And do a better job for you and everybody there. One thing that's not really mentioned in that report that the state legislature support staff in these schools, principals, parents, kids. I think they're going to have some of the best and no questions asked. And the same a school shooter before he went in and shot up that school. So what can we learn from this? In fact, I was here in, I think it was 2018 at MSU, and I don't know if the gentleman's in the room who served in Vietnam and came up to me and he said, about this AR-15, Beto, the shooting in Parkland had just taken place. He said, the young man who committed that shooting there was better armed than I was in Vietnam. And he was up against kids who had no helmets, no protection, no idea that they were at war when they went to school that day. I have since learned, as I've done some research, that weapon, along with the AK-47, were originally designed for use in combat. And I know that there's now a recreational version of that sold here in the United States. In fact, a lot of versions of that sold here in the United States. I was listening to a historian and a doctor on this on the radio actually just yesterday, and she said it was designed, that high impact, high velocity round, to penetrate the enemy's helmet at 500 yards. Now, of course, none of those kids were wearing a helmet in Uvalde, and they weren't at 500 yards. They were at 5 feet or closer. Their parents had to identify their bodies by the shoes that they were wearing because there was not a whole bunch up here left to see. So I'm of the opinion, I know it's not shared by everyone, that we shouldn't have AR-15s or AK-47s in civilian life. I think that makes sense on a battlefield, in war. But I want to acknowledge we're in a democracy. And as governor, I'm going to have to find a way to make progress and to move forward. And if we can't get agreement on that, perhaps we can get agreement on raising the age of purchase from 18 to at least 21. That would have averted that shooting for sure. And for those who ask what I don't think is an unreasonable question, hey, Beto, criminals don't follow the law. They're going to get that gun anyhow. This guy in Uvalde followed the law. He wanted that gun. He waited patiently every day until he turned 18. The law in Texas is 18. You're good to go. He was good to go, and there he went. So raising the age to 21, I've heard Republicans say that they support it, Democrats, gun owners, non-gun owners. You add to that a universal background check. We have them when you purchase from a licensed arms dealer now, from a gun dealer now. And that's great. But in Texas, because we don't have a universal background check, you can go find a private seller and buy the exact same weapon from them, no questions asked, and that is legal in the state of Texas. In Midland, Odessa in 2019, guy went into a gun store, tried to buy a gun, didn't pass a background check, bought that same firearm, happened to be an AR-15, from a private seller, went up and shot up his town, shot a baby girl in the face. She miraculously survived, but 8 other people did not. Another idea is a red flag law. I mentioned the Uvalde shooter was telling people that he wanted to do something like this. Wasn't clear legally that there was any way for law enforcement to intervene. A red flag law says, if you're threatening to shoot yourself, or your spouse, or your girlfriend, or the people that you go to school with, or the folks with whom you work, and you have a firearm in the house, we can intervene before it's too late. Through due process, return that firearm to you once all legitimate concerns have been satisfied. We uphold the Second Amendment while doing a better job of protecting the lives of the people in our community. The El Paso shooter, also in 2019, ordered an AK-47. When the gun came in, his mom called the Allen Police Department right here in North Texas, or not too far from here in North Texas. And she said, I have no idea what my son wants with this AK-47. She may have also indicated that there were other problems that caused her to call the police. You don't call the police when your son receives a firearm unless there aren't some issues. Nothing the cops could do. He drove that AK-47 600 miles to El Paso. He'd been warned by Trump. He'd been warned by Greg Abbott that there was an invasion coming into this country. And Abbott says we've got to take matters into our own hands. We must defend ourselves. Those are direct quotes from Greg Abbott. This guy, obviously listening to that kind of rhetoric, came to El Paso and killed 23 people with that AK-47 in a matter of minutes. It was the last Saturday before school started that year in 2019. And, speaking of school, not only did Abbott do nothing to make shootings like that less likely, as you probably know, he signed something into law called permitless carry. We used to have license to carry in Texas, which I support, or I supported when we had it, which meant that if you want to carry a gun in public, that's fine. Just pass this background check, take some firearms training, and we're going to vet you to make sure that you're not going to be a danger to yourself or to other people, and you are good to go. And by and large, más o menos, that worked. 38,000 times over the last 5 years, someone applied for a license to carry and was denied. Because when they went through that vetting and that background check, we discovered that they had a violent criminal history. And there's a good chance they were going to use that firearm against somebody else. 38,000 times we averted disaster. Now, all 38,000 of those people are able to carry loaded guns on our streets. We're none the wiser. We are none the safer. And so are the tens of thousands of people who never applied for a license to carry because they never would have passed the background check for that license. So we could restore the license to carry program, enact red flag laws, expand universal background checks, and raise the minimum age of purchase to 21. We do that in addition to listening to you about how we improve safety at our individual schools. We're going to do a much better job of saving lives. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Okay, right behind you.
Thank you.
Hi, Beto. I was just going to ask you 2 short questions. I just read this weekend about Governor Newsom about to present a gun bill. Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about his gun bill.
Okay. Well, he's pretty much going to present it like Abbott has presented the abortion issue, and he knows it's going to go to the Supreme Court. So I just want...
This must be when Abbott passed the 6-week abortion ban, put a $10,000 bounty on the back of anyone who assisted any woman, and allowed any American to try to cash in on that. So he's going to do the same thing with guns in California. Gotcha.
Yes. The other question was, have you heard of the new MAGA in Texas? Mothers Against Greg
Abbott. Yes. Next time you see that MAGA hat coming your way, look a little bit closer. It may be Mothers Against Greg Abbott. Thank you for raising that. And on this issue of guns or abortion and the Supreme Court, probably part of the reason that we are where we are right now is we failed to anticipate or imagine just how radical and extreme some of these people were. I mean, if we were in this room and I got up and I said, hey, Fair warning, everybody, they're going to ban abortion completely, no exception for rape or incest in the state of Texas after half a century of this being the law of the land. Some people would say, you know what, that's feasible or that's possible. I know they campaign on this, but it's never going to happen. They've talked about this for 49 years. Well, they've been working on it for 49 years, but they're not going to stop there. In an opinion that Justice Clarence Thomas wrote that accompanied the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe versus Wade, he said they're going after contraception next. They're going to go after intimacy between same-sex partners, literally reviving our sodomy laws in states like Texas. And it's almost laughable, but it's like the least funny thing in the world to think that we would be locking people up for loving the person of their choice. And also on there is marriage equality. Those three things have been designated by at least one justice in the Supreme Court. But that guy was also behind this abortion ban. And maybe we thought he was in right field 10 years ago, but he was telling us exactly where this country was headed unless we stood up for one another. That makes this election that much more urgent, because every one of those proposals by Clarence Thomas will become the law of the land in the state of Texas unless we win this election. So no pressure, folks, but this one is on ours and we got to win. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it. Hi there.
Hello again. Yes, you need our votes. And you also need our spiritual support. But let us not forget, his campaign also needs our financial support.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Cynthia, can you make sure we get his address? Because we're going to get him a thank you note. You got it? Okay, and it's probably on this check as well. As I say thank you to you, and I'll make sure that I also write it down and send it, because you deserve that. This is big.
We can get one on here.
Okay, we can get one on there. I want to thank everyone who's pitched in. I don't know if you saw the news. We outraised Greg Abbott by $3 million. $3 million. 500,000 individual contributions. The largest group of contributors to this campaign are school teachers. So thank you all for everything that you're doing. Thank you, sir.
All right, here we go.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. One, you did during your talk, you didn't mention the border. And the other thing is I'd like you to address your contribution from George Soros, who's one of the most controversial people in the United States today.
Absolutely, happy to. So two questions. Let me start with the first one on the border. And as you probably know, my wife Amy and I are raising our 3 children on the border. It's a community called El Paso. It is connected to Ciudad Juarez, forming the largest binational community anywhere in this hemisphere. And, officially, and this is probably a conservative estimate as well, officially 25% of the people we live with in El Paso were born in another country. And they chose to come to the United States. They chose to come to Texas. And I love that they chose to live in El Paso. We also happen to be one of, if not the safest cities in America many years, including during the years before we had a wall. In the years after we had a wall, actually our safety declined a little bit. Here's my argument to you. We are one of, if not the safest cities in America, not in spite of the presence of those immigrants, but because of the presence of those immigrants in our community. So, I say that because there are going to be folks whose names rhyme with Greg Abbott who are going to try to tell you that these immigrants are a danger to us. They're going to take our jobs. They're going to steal our benefits. They're going to make life terrible for all of us. And they're not. They want to work jobs that almost no one born in this state is willing to work. When I go to the cotton gin in Roscoe, Texas, there's 46 jobs in that gin. They cannot find a single person born in Roscoe or nearby Sweetwater who's willing to take a single one of those jobs for whatever reason. I talk to ranchers, who's going to fix their fence. It's not the kids who grew up in the community. Sometimes it's your own kids if you force them to do it. But if you need to hire somebody, very often it's an immigrant. Who's working in the slaughterhouses? Who's on top of the roofs? Who's in the kitchens? Who's in the cotton fields right now? I tell you, it's people who come here for the privilege of making sure that we can feed ourselves, that our economy is running, and we want to make sure that there's a legal, orderly, safe path for them to come here to do this. And to your question, I bet you and I share the concern that it is not those things right now. There are people who want to come here who cannot find a safe, legal, orderly path to come here. They come in between our ports of entry. They come here undocumented. I think it's a legitimate question to ask, who is coming into this country? Where are they? And how do we make sure that they are contributing and not, in some cases, a danger to us? Because mixed in, and it's a very small percentage, with those people who come here to work and to better themselves and do better for all of us, are those who want to traffic in things like fentanyl that are killing people in our communities. There are those who traffic in human beings, and we should take that very seriously. If we were more concerned with solutions and not stunts, and when I say stunts, I mean putting migrants on buses and sending them to Washington, D.C., or building a couple of miles of a wall, which is more of a public art installation than it is anything else on the border. I'm talking about the involuntary activation of 10,000 members of the Guard who had but a week to say goodbye to their kids, to their community, to their jobs for a 1-year deployment on the border where they have no arrest or detention powers. They can only spot and report into Border Patrol. Since that deployment began, 4 of them have taken their own lives. 4 of them have died in questionable circumstances so far. We don't need any more of that. I'd end that involuntary activation, and I'd get folks focused on real solutions. Like, what about this? A guest worker program for anybody who wants to come here and work, and if they want to return to their home countries, as most people, by the way, do. Very often when you come here and the border's so militarized and there wasn't a legal pathway, instead of returning to your home country, you invite your family to come up to this country and join you. A guest worker program. Right now, we're forcing people to live in squalor while they await the adjudication of their claims, in some cases for years. That is not befitting of a country that was made great in large part by immigrants who came here as refugees and asylum seekers from around the world. If we were to lead on those solutions, on Texas terms, not Democratic Party terms, not Republican Party terms, on Texas terms, on the very legitimate threats that I think you and I are both concerned about, drug trafficking and human trafficking. So it's been since Ronald Reagan was the president of these United States of America that we had any kind of comprehensive immigration reform. We as Texans understand this issue. We as the defining border state with Mexico live this issue more than anyone else. As governor, I'm going to make sure that we focus on those solutions. The other question you asked was about George Soros as a donor. Yes, he is one of those 500,000 contributions that we received, totaling $27 million from all of these people, 3 million more than the governor raised. Chris, how many individual contributions did the governor have?
113,000.
He had 113,000. We had 500,000 individual contributions. So average contribution much lower, coming from more people. Largest group, school teachers. Other questions, Connell? You need to stand so everybody can see this great teacher's shirt that she's wearing right now. Thank you.
I am a public educator for 13 years, and the TEA is not in favor of Texas educators. I know that we all want more money, for the work that we do, because it's evenings and weekends, and it's all of the hundreds of dollars that I put into my classroom so that my children can have an experience and learn. But at what point are these mandated legislative actions, such as the Reading Academy and this push for these standardized STAR tests that are unattainable, and as research has shown, they are highly above what a student should be developmentally at. And so we have this government entity, the TA, that is giving us these mandates, that is handing down this and then threatening our licenses so that we can't do our job, and that someone has to hold that accountable, which is the governor.
Thanks for this question. You kind of rack your brain to figure out who the STAR test is good for. And, maybe originally for the people who envisioned it, it was with the best of intentions, right? And maybe not, right? But what we know today is that the single greatest beneficiary is the corporation that makes money off the state of Texas buying the STAR test and making sure that every single child has to take it. As a parent, I know the stress that my kids have the night before the STAR test, which I guess has something to do with the stress that they're picking up from their classroom teacher that she or he has the night before that STAR test. I know anecdotally, as an English major whose favorite book on the planet is The Odyssey, so much so that we named our child Ulysses because we didn't have the guts to name him Odysseus. In some of our high schools now, they teach the abridged version of The Odyssey. You ask a student why that is, they say, our teacher has to reserve and set aside so many days and now weeks of high stakes, high pressure, standardized test prep. They say, I'm learning how to take a test instead of learning one of the greatest stories that has ever been told. That shows you how screwed up our priorities are in the state of Texas. I've also not yet met the teacher who doesn't want to do better, who doesn't want better for those kids in the classroom, who is disinterested in, say, a true diagnostic tool that helps her to deliver better education or get more resources into the classroom. But we're in the last state, or one of the last states now, that still requires the STAR test for graduation from high school on top of everything else we ask our kids and our educators to do. So in addition to canceling the STAR test that I mentioned earlier, I will appoint as the next TEA commissioner a classroom teacher and educator like you, because they will know what you're going through and they'll have a solution that is based on listening to you. Thank you for coming out.
Okay, I have time for just a few more.
Okay, Cynthia says just a few more. Thanks for everyone and everyone's patience. Good to see you again.
My pleasure, sir. It's obvious what I want to talk about tonight. A lot of Democrats in this state, especially in this county that's 70% Republican and 30% Democrat, are afraid to put paraphernalia out supporting their Democrat candidates because things are defamed, issues happen. My real issue, though, is that I'm quite active on Twitter, and I hear all the time about how Democrats, when they see a flag flying on a truck or something, they equate it with Trumpism. And so we're afraid of it. And I brought this flag today to counter. I have a proposal for people, and that is that this flag my father flew every day until he passed just before 9/11. It hasn't flown again until 3 days ago when I put it out when Steve Bannon was charged. I flew it for 48 hours in his neighborhood, and I took it down. It'll go out again the next time a seditionist, anyone who was involved in that the J6 community or council is after, until we get it. To me, it's kind of like Pavlov's dogs. The Republicans will eventually understand that why we are flying it. We're taking our flag back. Yeah. It represents everyone, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or independent. It represents everyone, no matter what their background is. And it's time to take it back.
Thank you so much for being here, for bringing your father's flag out, and for reminding us of the fact that before we're Republicans or Democrats, we're Americans. And I hope we can hold these common values like a democracy, like free and fair elections, like accepting the outcome of the vote. You know, to show you one difference between Ted Cruz and I'm not talking about him being at the Ritz-Carlton while I was here in Texas. I'm talking about what he did on the 6th of January and what I did in November of 2018. With your help, many of you here, we ran a really good campaign, hard fought. We traveled to each of the 254 counties. We gave it all that we got. We got really, really close to that guy. And on election night, you know, I got to tell you, going into this, I'm not that kind of guy. I don't allow myself to hope for things until we've achieved those things. But I was thinking, you know, I think we are going to win this race. I feel it as I travel this state. I see it everywhere that I go. And so as the returns came in, and we were up, we were down, we were up, we were down, then we were down, and then we were down. And someone from my team came to me and they said, look, I've done the math on this. There's just no way that you're going to overcome this deficit. And so it's up to you, Beto, what you do now. And I asked for Ted Cruz's cell phone number, and I called him and I said, you know, you ran a hard-fought campaign. It looks as though you have won. Congratulations. You're going to be our senator for the next 6 years. I still serve in the United States House. If there's anything I can do for you, any way that we can work together, this is my cell phone number. Call me anytime. And he said, thanks, Beto. And we hung up. He gave his victory speech, and I gave my concession speech. For 246 years, more or less, that's how this thing has run. I went to Trump's inauguration. I got so much shit from people back home who said, what are you doing? This guy is terrible. And I said, I agree with you that this guy is terrible. But the fact that we can still pull off the peaceful transfer of power in this country, the guy who for the last 8 years, Barack Obama, who's just almost worked himself to death to move us in a certain direction, is going to hand the baton to a guy who's promised to undermine every single thing he's done. And there will be no violence there. And we're going to give speeches. Everybody's going to be on the same stage. That's a pretty amazing thing. Let us not mess with this anymore. So your reminder that we find a way to come back together, that those of us who are Democrats, you do not judge the Republicans in your life. It doesn't matter who they voted for last time. Frankly, it does not matter who they vote this next time. The Republicans that are among us in the room want you to know that you are in the right place and you are welcomed here with us. And we want to work with you together, not to advance a Democratic Party agenda, but a Texas agenda and an American agenda. And thank you so much for being here. Awesome.
Okay, here we go. Right over here.
Yes, sir. Beto, thank you for coming to Wichita Falls. And I know that you mentioned going and talking to neighbors, and that's the most effective thing. And now I helped my father do that when he was running for county commissioner, and those days of going and knocking on doors are over for me because I'm a father, busy, you know. But I would like to invite you. What I could do for you is I run a political podcast here in Wichita Falls, the beautiful building, Hamilton building, and I've spoke with cool people like Kathleen Brown. I can't wait to hear your story, Kathleen. I would love to invite you whenever you're either here, you know, soon or in the near future to come on. Tell the people, majority of my listeners are from Wichita County. It's probably 95%. And I could get your story, your political story, your business story, your story to the people of Wichita County. I'd love to sit down and pick your brain, hear from you. I'm sorry, I'm super nervous.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
But I would just love to hear from you. And I know that the majority of my people are from Wichita Falls. And then I would love to give you my platform to give your story. Just like I'm here to hear it today, I'd like to give it to everybody, all my friends, family that didn't come today. So
wonderful. Tell us the name of the show again.
Texas Barons Podcast.
Texas Barons Podcast.
Yeah, you can check it out.
Chris, we're gonna find a way to do this, either on this visit
good.
or the next visit.
Okay.
We may even have some time tomorrow.
I've tried reaching out to your Facebook. I understand you're a busy man, a lot of moving parts. I got with the press team, couldn't hear anything back, but I'd love to sit down and really hear your story and broadcast it to Wichita County.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Sir.
Yeah, done.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I wish I could get to everybody, but this is going to have to be our last question.
My name is Kay Winterborn. I'm the president of the local Democratic Association. Everybody in this room, we're open every day, 5 days a week, 10 to 2. And what we're doing every day from 10 to 2 are Beto letters. We've got probably about 1,000 letters ready to mail in October. And you are welcome to come by and help us help this man.
Okay, I love that. I mentioned how powerful it is to see another human at your door at a time that we're so disconnected and devoted to our digital devices. It's the same when you get a letter written in someone's own hand. It's like getting this human artifact in an age where there are none left. So, Kay, we're going to take you up on your offer. Folks are going to join you. There are three primary ways you can help this campaign. I'll add a fourth, but three: knocking on doors, really, really powerful. Making phone calls, that also is important. Writing these letters, you can also text. And then, as a gentleman just reminded us a little bit earlier, you can make donations to this campaign so that we have the resources to reach people that we otherwise cannot personally get in touch with. We cannot find their phone number. If we don't have the right address to mail that letter to or to knock on their door, we're going to try to get them through broadcast television, through social media, through other form of paid media. So all of these things are so important. Kay, it sounds like you have something else.
I was just informed that I did not give the address, which is 3308 Kemp. It is right next door to Sherwin-Williams Paint Company. And you don't have to worry about printing them out because my printer never stops. So all you have to do is come down and help us. We'll even get the postage. We're going to get them to the post office on the right day. Just come help us. My hand is tired.
Let's do it. I want to thank Kay. I want to thank Kathleen. I want to thank everybody who made this meeting possible today, everyone who asked all of these great questions. This community that has always so warmly welcomed us every time that we've come, the 5 times during this race, the many, many times during the Senate race, the times in between when there was no race and we just showed up to hang out because we didn't know where else to go and Wichita Falls would take us in. It's a beautiful community. Every time I'm here, and I'll do the same thing tomorrow morning, I run out to the lake and I do as much of a circle of that lake as I can. Beautiful to watch the sun rise over it, to see the birds come to life. It's just an extraordinary place. Growing up in El Paso, in the Chihuahuan Desert, in the Franklin Mountains, at a base elevation of 4,000 feet. And you can ask Chris, who is just gorgeous. You all are so lucky to live here, and I want you to take that from an outsider who can see it with fresh eyes. So thank you. Les agradezco. Gracias. Muchísimas gracias. Adiós.